Imagine looking into someone's eyes, knowing they only know the smallest fraction of who you truly are. Some truths sit heavier than silence itself, and this one was mine. It all began on the night I chose to walk away from my own name. A calculated mistake, people would say. An insult to my reputation, others would insist. But to me, it was the only path left, if I ever wanted to discover whether someone could love the man. Not the legacy, the heart, not the empire. So I put on a simple suit, sat behind the wheel of a car I had personally designed, and let the world believe I was nothing more than the chauffeur. If this story touches you, stay with me until the end. And if you believe love is stronger when stripped of appearances, like this video, subscribe and share it. Some stories aren't meant to be watched, they're meant to be felt. The first time I saw her, she crossed the marble lobby of Collins Automotive as if life had been trying to shrink her for years, and she refused. Head held high, shoulders tight, clutching a worn bag against her chest. She wasn't a woman born into luxury. And strangely, that was exactly why something in me shifted before I even understood why. She walked quickly, dodging executives in tailored suits, ignoring condescending glances, holding a folder of resumes like it was the last piece of hope she owned. And I, sitting inside the luxury sedan that carried my initials discreetly engraved on the dashboard, felt something I hadn't felt in years. Shame, not for her, for myself. When the passenger door opened, she exhaled in relief, the kind of relief that makes you wish you had earned it. "You're the driver, right? I'm really late. Could we go?" Time stalled for a moment. I should have told her the truth. Every version of honor I'd ever been taught whispered it to me. But then she smiled, just a small, careful smile. The kind that didn't expect anything, didn't demand anything, didn't take advantage of anything, and suddenly, for reasons I couldn't begin to explain, I wanted to be exactly the man she saw. "Of course," I said, surprised at how different my voice sounded. Softer, warmer. "Hop in." She sat inside with the kind of respect people usually reserve for holy places, and that told me everything about her life. She wasn't used to anything like this, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the urge to leave behind the world I belonged to. Traffic moved slowly, but she was even quieter, watching the city through the window as if trying to understand where she fit in a place built for people who didn't look like her, didn't struggle like her, didn't fight like her. I shouldn't speak. Chauffeurs don't initiate conversations, but her silence pressed against my chest like a weight I didn't know how to carry. "Is it your first day?" She gave a tiny laugh, more from exhaustion than humor. "First day trying to get a first day. I don't even have the job yet." Her honesty disarmed me. It was raw, unpolished, real. "You nervous?" I asked. She held the strap of her bag as if grounding herself. Not nervous, just tired of doors closing, tired of trying. But something about today feels different. The way she breathed after those words made me believe it too. The world outside felt distant, blurred. But inside that car, something sharpened, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Each sentence she spoke peeled away a piece of the man I had become, guarded, distant, comfortable behind walls built out of wealth and caution. She didn't know my name. She didn't know my world. She didn't know what I could give or take. And yet, she spoke to me with a sincerity no one had offered me in years. At a red light, she turned to me, curiosity softening the exhaustion in her eyes. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Do you like what you do?" A simple question, a dangerous one. I hesitated too long, and she filled the silence with a gentle, self-conscious smile. "Sorry, I just wonder sometimes if we get too used to the life we have." Her words hit me harder than they should have. Because no one had ever thought to ask me something so simple, so human. Sometimes, I murmured, we forget who we were before we had everything. That made her look at me differently, not with admiration, not with suspicion, with interest. Genuine interest. We pulled up to the curb outside her destination. She held her bag tightly, took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for listening. You don't even know me." "I know enough," I said. She paused halfway out of the car, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "If I get the job, will you still be here when I'm done?" My pulse stilled. I kept my posture professional, eyes forward. "Yes, I'll be here." But I had no idea how much that yes would change my life. She disappeared through the revolving doors, swallowed by the building and the world she was fighting so hard to enter. I stayed behind the wheel long after she was gone, hands resting on the leather I had chosen years before, wondering when a steering wheel had last felt like a refuge instead of a burden. Her voice lingered in the quiet. Her honesty stayed with me. And the question she asked, "Do you like what you do?" pressed against parts of me I had buried beneath polished boardrooms and immaculate suits. I leaned back, watching people hurry past the windshield, each one carrying their own story. Yet none of them had looked at me the way she did, like I was someone worth talking to, even without a title, a last name, or the weight of a company behind me. Minutes passed, maybe more than I'd admit. I kept replaying the moment she stepped out of the car, holding her hope like something fragile. I hadn't seen someone believe in themselves that fiercely in a long time, maybe ever. When she finally reappeared, her steps were slower, careful, almost suspended in uncertainty. She scanned the street, and when her eyes found the car, found me, something warm and startled softened her expression. She truly didn't expect me to be there, and the fact that she didn't expect it said everything. She opened the door gently, as if afraid of bringing disappointment inside with her. The moment she sat down, the silence told me more than words. I didn't need to ask. She didn't get the job. But she lifted her chin, brave in a way most powerful people never are. "It wasn't the right fit," she said, trying to make it sound small. It wasn't small. It was breaking her. I could see it in the way her fingers trembled slightly when she folded the resume folder against her lap. "I'm sorry," I murmured. She shook her head. "You don't need to be. You're just the driver." Just the driver. She said it with respect, not dismissal. But each time she called me that, a small hidden part of me unraveled. "I told myself," she continued quietly, "that if today didn't work, I'd try somewhere else. Maybe I'm not meant for these places." I gripped the steering wheel at the way she said "these places," as if there were worlds she simply wasn't allowed to belong to. "You belong wherever you decide to stand," I said before I could stop myself. She turned, surprised by the certainty in my voice. "Do you really think that?" "Yes." I didn't know her, and somehow I knew enough. She breathed out, a soft, shaking breath, and leaned her head against the window. The late afternoon light touched her face, outlining her in gold, and for a moment, the world outside the car seemed strangely quiet. "Where to now?" I asked. She hesitated. "Home." A single word, but it held disappointment, fatigue, and a quiet kind of courage. We drove through narrow streets lined with small stores, cafes with chipped tables, people carrying groceries or pushing old bikes. Her world, not mine. Yet strangely, it felt more honest. She watched everything through the window, fingers tapping lightly against her knee, as if she were lost in thoughts she didn't dare say aloud. After a while, she whispered, "You ever have days when everything you try feels like it slips through your fingers, more than she could imagine?" "Yes," I said simply. "What did you do?" "The truth? I built an empire. filled my life with luxury and order and responsibility so heavy it suffocated the boy I used to be. But chauffeurs don't say things like that. I kept trying, I answered instead. She smiled, not because she believed it, but because she wanted to. It was the most fragile smile I had ever seen. When we reached her neighborhood, she straightened up, suddenly self-conscious. The buildings were old, laundry hanging from balconies, kids running between parked cars. She looked at me, as if waiting for me to judge her life before she even stepped out. I didn't. I couldn't. There was nothing to judge. "You don't have to come tomorrow," she said quietly. "I'll find my way." Something tightened inside me. "I'll be here," I said. Her eyes widened slightly. "But this is out of your route." "I don't mind." She pressed her lips together, confused, a little touched, but still trying to make sense of the kindness of a man she believed she barely knew. "You're very different from the drivers I've met," she whispered. If she only knew. She stepped out of the car slowly, holding her folder against her chest, but before closing the door, she leaned in just a bit. "Thank you for not making me feel small today." The door closed softly, and I sat there, realizing that for the first time in years, someone had given me something too, something I hadn't felt in a long while, a chance to be seen, not as a name or a title or a legacy, but simply as a man. I didn't know her story yet, but I knew this. Tomorrow, I'd be there before she even stepped outside. The next morning, I arrived 20 minutes early. I told myself it was because traffic could be unpredictable, because punctuality was part of the persona I had chosen. But the truth was simpler, quieter, and far more dangerous. I wanted to see her again. The neighborhood was still waking up. Shops opening metal shutters, the smell of fresh bread drifting from the small bakery on the corner, children running with half-tied shoelaces. It was a world untouched by the speed and pressure of mine, a world where people lived instead of performed. For a moment I wondered who I might have become if I had grown up somewhere like this. She stepped out of her building just as the sun brushed the rooftops with gold. Her hair was loose this time, falling around her shoulders in soft waves. She looked surprised, truly surprised, when she saw the car waiting. "You came." Her voice held disbelief, wrapped in something like relief. "I said I would." She hesitated a moment before opening the door, studying me as though trying to understand my intentions. People in power often attract distrust, envy, manipulation. But she didn't know anything about that world. All she saw was a driver who kept his word. "Good morning," she murmured as she settled into the seat. "Good morning." Now she clutched her bag on her lap, fingers tracing the edges nervously. "There's another place I want to try today," she said, but her tone wasn't hopeful. It was cautious, weary. "Where to?" She gave me an address, and I started the engine. The city slowly opened around us as we drove, sunlight reflecting off glass windows, illuminating the quieter corners most people rushed past without seeing. She watched everything as if memorizing details she might need later, street names, buildings, expressions on strangers' faces. There was a quiet determination in her, the kind that didn't come from confidence, but from necessity. After a long silence, she spoke softly. "I didn't sleep much last night." "Worried?" She let out a sad laugh. "When you're running out of options, sleep feels like a luxury." I should have stayed silent, but some truths demand space. "You're not out of options." Her eyes drifted to me, doubtful but touched. "You make it sound simple." "Sometimes it is." She shook her head, staring out the window again. "I've worked so many jobs, restaurants, cleaning, reception, and every time I think something stable is coming, life reminds me that stability wasn't made for people like me." There it was, the wound beneath her quiet bravery. "What are you looking for?" I asked. She thought long before answering. "A chance. Just one. To stop surviving and finally start living." The car filled with a silence so heavy it almost vibrated. I gripped the wheel tighter, not because of guilt, but because of recognition. Success had put distance between me and the version of myself who once wanted the same thing. "You will," I said. "You'll get that chance." She didn't reply, but her fingers loosened around her bag. We arrived at the new company. A smaller building, less intimidating than Collins Automotive, but still polished enough to make her straighten her shirt nervously. She inhaled deeply, gathering courage. I watched her through the windshield after she stepped out. Small frame, fragile hopes, but a spine made of quiet steel. Then she disappeared through the doors. This time, I didn't wait inside the car. I stepped out, walked a few meters, stood under the shade of a tree across the street. I didn't know why. Maybe I wanted to understand the world she was walking into, or maybe I simply didn't want her to face it alone. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then 45. Finally, she came out. Her steps were slower than yesterday, but not defeated. There was something different this time, something uncertain but not broken. She spotted me standing there, her eyebrows rose, confusion flickering across her expression. "You waited outside?" "Yes." She blinked twice as if my answer didn't match her understanding of the world. "I'm not used to people staying." "Maybe it's time someone did." That stole her breath for a heartbeat. She opened the car door and sat inside, folding her hands over her lap. "It wasn't an interview," she whispered. "They said the position was filled before I even arrived." "I'm sorry." She shook her head quickly. "No, it's okay. Really, I don't know how many more days like this I can take." The vulnerability in her voice tightened something inside my chest. "You're stronger than you think," I said quietly. She turned her face toward me. "Why do you care so much?" "Because I saw myself in her. Because she made me feel human. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't drowning in expectations. I was breathing. But chauffeurs don't say those things. Because you deserve better." She held my gaze longer this time. And in that moment, something shifted. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. Two lives touching in a quiet place neither of us expected. As I drove away, I didn't know where this path would lead. All I knew was this: I wasn't ready to let her walk it alone. The third day arrived with the kind of grey morning that seemed made of hesitation. The sky felt heavy, almost uncertain of itself, and somehow it matched the weight in my chest. I drove toward her neighborhood before the sun had fully risen, not because she had asked me to, she never would, but because waking up without a reason to see her felt strangely impossible now. When I pulled up to the familiar sidewalk, she was already outside. She wasn't rushing this time. She wasn't holding her resume folder like a shield. She wasn't fighting the morning. She was just standing there, arms wrapped around herself, as if trying to hold together whatever courage she had left. When she noticed the car, something flickered across her face. Not relief, not surprise, something deeper, something afraid to hope. She opened the door slowly and slid into the seat, placing her bag beside her. "You came early," she murmured. "So did you." She let out a faint, breathy laugh. I couldn't sleep again. I studied her profile. The way exhaustion softened her strength. The way determination still lived quietly in the corner of her eyes. "There's a company downtown hiring for administrative support," she finally said. "It's a long shot, but I have to try." "You don't have to explain," I said gently. She looked down at her hands. "Maybe I do. You've been kinder than any stranger has the right to be." I stopped breathing for a second. She didn't know how wrong she was about the stranger part or the right part. "Kindness doesn't need a reason," I said softly. She didn't answer. But her shoulders dropped slightly, as if those words eased something inside her. We drove in silence for a while, the city slowly shaping itself around us as the morning brightened. She kept glancing at the buildings outside, taking deep breaths, preparing herself the way someone prepares to walk into a storm, choosing bravery even when fear sits heavy in their chest. "Do you ever wonder," she said suddenly, "if your life would have been different if someone gave you a chance at the right moment?" Every muscle in my jaw tightened. "Yes," I said quietly. "I wonder that all the time." She turned her head a little, surprised by my honesty. "You?" I nodded, eyes on the road. "I had chances," I said, "but not the ones that made me feel understood. Those are the ones that matter." She didn't know it, but I was talking about her. About the quiet way she awakened something in me I had long buried. When we reached the tall glass building downtown, she inhaled sharply, straightened her shirt, and lifted her chin with an almost painful determination. "This is it," she whispered. "You've got this," I said. She looked at me, really looked, as if trying to draw strength from a man she thought she barely knew. Then she stepped out and walked toward the entrance. Minutes passed. Then more. Then more. Every person who exited the building without her made something inside me tighten. I didn't realize how tense I'd become until she finally emerged, slower than she had before, her shoulders curved slightly inward, her gaze down. For a moment, she just stood on the sidewalk, not moving, not breathing, braking quietly. I got out of the car. She didn't notice until I was a few steps away. Her head lifted, and when her eyes met mine, I saw it. The kind of defeat that doesn't come from a single rejection, but from a lifetime of barely holding on. "They told me," she whispered, "that I'm not what they're looking for." Anger rose in my chest, not the explosive kind, but the heavy, controlled kind that comes from witnessing something profoundly unfair. "You are more than enough," I said. She shook her head quickly, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes even as she tried to blink them away. "You don't know me. I'm starting to." Her breath broke at that. For a second, a single fragile second, she let the vulnerability show. Her shoulders softened, her lips trembled, and she looked at me like someone who didn't know how to accept comfort because she'd survived too long without it. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, voice cracking. "Why do you keep coming back?" The only truthful answer was dangerous, because she made me feel alive, because she made me remember the parts of myself I'd lost, because without knowing it, she had become the only genuine thing in my carefully constructed world. But chauffeurs don't say any of that, so instead, I said the only thing I could. Because no one should walk through life thinking they're alone. Her breath stilled, her eyes softened. Something inside her shifted, gently, quietly, but unmistakably. She stepped a little closer, searching my expression as if trying to read something she wasn't sure she had permission to see. "I don't know what I'd do without you these last few days," she whispered, and that was the moment I knew I was in trouble, because I wanted to stay. I wanted to keep showing up for her. I wanted to be the man she thought I was, and maybe the one I had never dared to be. But every step I took toward her was a step deeper into a lie that was already starting to cost me more than I expected. And then, just as she opened her mouth to say something else, her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen, froze, and her expression changed completely. Fear, shock, recognition. She looked at me with a trembling breath. It's Collins Automotive. They want me to come back." Her hand trembled around the phone as if the message itself carried weight. Collins Automotive. The place that had dismissed her without ever seeing her. The building where she'd walked in with hope and walked out holding the pieces of it. She swallowed hard, staring at the screen as though afraid it would vanish. "They want me to come back," she whispered again, voice barely holding itself together. "I don't know why. They didn't give me a chance before. Why now?" There are moments when life shifts almost imperceptibly. A breath, a word, a vibration on a screen, and suddenly the path ahead splits. This was one of those moments. "Then you should go," I said softly. She took a small step back as if overwhelmed. "I don't know if I can. What if it's nothing? What if it's worse than last time? You don't have to walk into it alone." Her eyes lifted, fragile and searching. "But what if I fail? Then I'll be right here when you walk out." Something in her expression broke then, not in pain, but in relief so deep it frightened her. She held the phone to her chest for a moment, grounding herself, and nodded. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay, let's go." We drove toward Collins Automotive in silence. Not an empty silence, but one thick with the weight of possibilities. Her fingers tightened and loosened around her bag, her breathing uneven, her eyes fixed on the skyline as if trying to decode her own destiny in the glass of the city. "Why would they call me back?" she whispered finally. I froze, the truth clawing at the back of my throat. Because I asked them to. Because I emailed HR anonymously. Because I couldn't watch the world keep closing doors on someone who deserved so much more. But none of those explanations belonged to a chauffeur. So I swallowed the truth that would break everything. "Sometimes people realize they overlooked the right person," I said instead. She looked at me, not with disbelief, but with a flicker of hope so raw it tightened my chest. When we reached the building, she didn't get out immediately. She stared through the windshield at the place that had wounded her. The marble floors, the mirrored glass, the sharp edges that made ordinary people feel small. "I'm scared," she said softly. "I know. I don't want to get hurt again. I know. Will you wait?" I nodded. "As long as it takes." She closed her eyes for a second, breathed in courage, and stepped out of the car. And once again she disappeared through the revolving doors. But this time, I couldn't just sit there. I stepped out of the car and waited on the sidewalk, pretending to scroll through my phone, pretending to be invisible. People in tailored suits brushed past me without a glance, unaware that their employer, the man whose signature approved their salaries, stood a few feet away from them. 15 minutes passed, 30, 45. My chest felt tight, not from waiting, but from wanting. Wanting her to get what she deserved, wanting her to be seen, valued, chosen. Not because I asked, but because she earned it. Then the doors opened. She stepped out slowly. At first, her expression was unreadable. Then something in her eyes softened, a disbelief so pure it almost looked like light. I walked toward her before I even realized I had moved. "What happened?" I asked quietly. She blinked, and tears gathered immediately. Not from sadness this time, from shock, relief, overwhelming gratitude. "They offered me a trial position," she whispered. 3 days. If I do well, it becomes permanent." A smile tugged at my mouth before I could stop it. "You deserve that." She shook her head, tears slipping free. "I don't know how it happened. I don't know why they gave me another chance. But I said yes." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Yes," she repeated, as if still convincing herself. "I said yes." And then something happened. Something simple, human, dangerous. She stepped toward me. Not much, just enough. Her shoulder brushed my arm, and she let out a trembling breath, as though the closeness steadied her. "Thank you," she whispered. For being here. I shouldn't have felt it the way I did. The warmth of her, the trust, the vulnerability she allowed only near me. You did this, I murmured. Not me. But the lie tasted heavier than any truth. She pulled back slightly, studying me. You always say the right thing, she said softly, even when I don't believe in myself. And you should believe in yourself. Why? She whispered. Why do you care so much about what happens to me? She wasn't asking out of suspicion. She was asking out of fear. Fear of needing someone. Fear of trusting the wrong person. Fear of being seen and then abandoned. My silence answered her. She stepped closer, too close, close enough that I could feel her breath against my chest. I don't understand you, she whispered, but I feel safe with you. The words hit me with a force I wasn't prepared for. Safe. No one had called me that in years. Before I could respond, her phone buzzed again. She startled, pulling it from her pocket. Her eyes widened. Her breath stopped. It's HR, she said. They want me to start tomorrow morning. Emotion flooded her face. Joy, shock, disbelief. And then, suddenly, a shadow crossed her expression, a fear deeper than before. What if I ruin this? She whispered. You won't. How do you know? I held her gaze, really held it, and let the truth slip through without giving myself away. Because I've seen who you are. Her lips parted slightly, a soft intake of breath, and for the first time she looked at me not as a driver, but as something else. Someone else. Something changed between us in that quiet, trembling second. Something irreversible. Something that would make the truth impossible to hide much longer. She started her first day at Collins Automotive with her shoulders drawn tight, her breath trembling, and her hopes held together by the thinnest thread of courage. I watched her walk through the revolving doors, the morning light following her like a quiet blessing, and for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Pride, not in myself, but in her. I waited outside longer than I intended. I told myself I would only stay 30 minutes. 30 became 40. 40 became an hour. I didn't know what I was waiting for, her smile, her relief, or the moment she needed someone, even if she didn't know it was me. Eventually, I forced myself back into the car. Chauffeurs didn't linger outside corporate headquarters like restless shadows. So I drove around the block, then around the neighborhood, then parked again where I could see the main doors without being seen. Hours passed. She didn't come out. When lunchtime approached, I realized my pulse had been tight for too long. I stepped out again, leaning against a pillar across the street. Executives brushed past me without recognition. A few nodded politely, not knowing they were nodding to the man who signed their bonuses. I kept my head down. The anonymity was oddly liberating. Then she appeared, not defeated, not trembling, not lost. She walked out with a small cardboard visitor pass in her hand and something cautious but real shining in her eyes. When she spotted me, she stopped mid-step, surprise melting into something warmer, something that pulled a soft, natural smile from her lips. "You're here," she said, almost breathless. "I said I would be." She walked toward me slowly, as if that truth alone steadied her. "How was it?" I asked. She exhaled shakily. "Overwhelming, terrifying, but good. I think it was good." We stood on the sidewalk, the world moving around us while she tried to gather words that felt too fragile to say aloud. They asked me to organize files, enter data, assist 2 managers. One of them was... She hesitated, a little sharp. "He talks fast, moves fast. Expects me to read his mind," I knew exactly which manager she meant, and I made a mental note to have a conversation with him, a polite, firm conversation about how people in my building treat new hires. But the other manager, she continued, was kind and patient, and she said something that I can't stop thinking about. She looked at me, eyes bright with something new. She told me I look like someone who deserves a chance. My chest tightened, because that was my exact instruction to HR, but she didn't need that truth. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You do deserve it, I said quietly. She looked away for a moment, blinking fast, overwhelmed. I didn't think anything good would happen again. Sometimes life surprises us. She met my gaze. You surprised me. Her words landed somewhere deep inside me, a place I didn't know was still alive. We walked toward the car together. It felt natural, easy, as though we had done it 100 times already. Once inside, she let her head fall back against the seat, finally allowing herself to breathe. I didn't eat, she murmured. I was too nervous. Do you want to stop somewhere? She hesitated. Do you mind? No. Her smile was small, grateful, almost shy. We drove to a tiny cafe 2 blocks away, the kind of place I never visited as the CEO, but somehow fit perfectly into the world I had with her. She ordered the simplest lunch on the menu, apologizing for it even though she didn't need to. You don't have to explain your choices, I said. She looked down at her hands. I guess I'm not used to feeling seen. I didn't respond. Not because I disagreed, but because I understood too well. Halfway through her meal, she glanced at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. You know, she said slowly, I never asked your name. My heart stilled. For days she had trusted me, confided in me, let me see the most fragile parts of her, and yet she didn't even know my name, because I had chosen to hide it. It's Ethan, I said. She repeated it softly, as if memorizing the shape of it. Ethan, it suits you. Suits me. If only she knew. What about you? I asked. Leah, she said with a tiny smile. Short for Amelia. Leah. The name fit her exactly. Soft, brave, quietly luminous. Leah, I repeated. It's beautiful. Her cheeks warmed. No one says it like that. Maybe no one had seen her the way I did. When we finished eating, she paused before opening the car door. Do you think I'll do well tomorrow? She asked, voice almost a whisper. Yes. She studied me carefully. You sound so sure. I am. Why? Because I believed in her more than I believed in most people I'd ever hired. Because she made me feel human in a world that had turned me into an emblem instead of a man. Because she was the first person in years who spoke to me with honesty instead of caution. But I only said the smallest piece of truth. Because you show up, I whispered, even when it hurts. Her breath caught. We sat there, suspended in a moment that felt both dangerous and inevitable. Then, gently, timidly, she reached across the seat and touched my hand. Not a romantic gesture, not a bold one, just a human touch, gratitude, trust, something that could become something more. And that was the moment I knew the lie couldn't survive much longer, because the closer she came to me, the more the truth threatened to break everything. The moment her manager called her name across the sidewalk, everything inside her tightened. Her hand slipped away from mine as she straightened, almost instinctively pulling herself back into the world she was trying so hard to enter. She looked at me once, a brief, silent apology in her eyes, before rushing toward the building. I stayed there in the car, heart beating slowly and painfully, watching her disappear again behind the glass doors. The truth pressed against my ribs like a pulse. If I didn't tell her soon, someone else would, or worse, she would find out on her own. And yet, I couldn't ruin the light she carried today. Not when she finally believed in herself. Not when she finally felt seen. Hours passed. The day slipped into late afternoon. When she finally emerged from the building, the sun was dipping low, painting the city in a soft gold that wrapped around her like a promise. She wasn't smiling this time. She was glowing. Quietly. Warmly. As if something inside her had settled into place. She walked toward the car slowly, almost hesitantly, as if the truth she had interrupted earlier still lingered between us. "Long day?" I asked when she sat down. She nodded, letting out a breath that trembled with exhaustion and pride. "A good one," she whispered, "a really good one." We drove without speaking for a while, letting the silence breathe between us. The city lights flickered on one by one as we passed, reflecting across the windshield like small constellations. When we stopped at a red light, she finally turned to me. "About earlier," she began softly. "I'm sorry I left so suddenly." "You had to," I said. "But I wasn't finished." Her voice faltered. "I asked if any part of what you've shown me was a lie." My chest tightened. "Leah," she shook her head gently, "you don't have to tell me everything. I know people carry pieces of themselves they're not ready to show. I don't want what we have to be built on something that isn't real." "What we have." She said it quietly, but it echoed through me like a confession. We pulled up to her building. The street was quiet, the air soft. A thin breeze brushed against the car. She didn't move to open the door. Instead, she turned fully toward me, her voice softer than the night around us. "Ethan, whatever you're afraid to tell me, it won't make me forget what you've done for me, or how you've made me feel these last days." My throat tightened. She exhaled slowly, almost shakily. "You made me believe I could fight again? I don't know why someone like you would care, but I'm grateful. Someone like me, if she only knew." I opened my mouth, the truth rising like a tide I could no longer hold back. "Leah," I whispered, "there's something you should—" But the words caught. Not because I didn't want to say them, because the moment felt too fragile, too unreal, too full of her trust, and not enough of my courage. So instead, I said the truest thing I could offer without shattering her world. "I care about you," I murmured. "More than I planned to, more than I should." Her breath hitched, her eyes softening with an emotion she tried and failed to hide. "I care about you too," she whispered. The street lamp outside cast a warm glow across her face, and in that quiet light, something shifted inside me. Something that had been frozen for years. She opened the door slowly, but before stepping out, she leaned back in. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Yes," I said, "of course." She nodded once, small, full of meaning, then stepped out into the soft evening air. She walked toward her building, then paused and turned back for a moment as if wanting to say something else, but choosing instead to simply hold my gaze. Then she vanished inside. I sat there long after she was gone, the truth burning in my chest. Tomorrow, I would tell her. Tomorrow I would step out from behind the wheel. Tomorrow she would meet the man behind the lie. And I prayed, quietly, desperately, that when she looked at me, she would still see the man she trusted, and not the one she feared she never belonged beside. Because some loves aren't lost suddenly. They're lost in the moment the truth arrives. And tomorrow, mine would. If this story touched your heart, like this video, comment your thoughts and tell me your rating from 0 to 10, and subscribe for more stories of love, courage, and redemption. Some treasures aren't measured in wealth, but in the courage to love honestly.